The Tower of Babel narrative is one of the most famous stories in the entirety of the Bible. Although the story is relatively short, a lot of fascinating insight can be drawn from it. The story provides an explanation about the origins of various human languages, but there is also reason to believe that we can learn about the future of humanity through the story and possibly the end of the age. To begin, let's take a look at the Tower of Babel narrative. The story is recorded in Genesis chapter 11 and most likely took place about 100 years after the flood of Noah. The story begins, "Now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, 'Come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, 'Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we will be dispersed over the face of the whole earth.'" From these verses, we learn that the Tower of Babel was built in Shinar, which is a reference to Babylonia. The motivation behind the building of the Tower of Babel is something of a mystery, and the Genesis narrative only states that the people wanted to make a name for themselves through the tower, in an effort to keep themselves from being dispersed over the face of the earth. We can draw some conclusions about the people's motives behind building the tower from other passages in Genesis, as well as the history surrounding Babylon in the Tower of Babel. We know that after the flood of Noah, God commanded Noah and his descendants to be fruitful and multiply throughout the face of the earth. The fact that the people of Babel or Shinar were adamant about remaining in one area is indicative of the people's defiance to the commands that God had given them. We can also learn about the possible motives of the people building the tower by understanding the shape of it. Although the Tower of Babel is typically represented as a structure looking something like this, it is most likely not a correct representation of what the tower actually looked like. The tower was most likely a ziggurat. A ziggurat is defined by Britannica as a pyramidal step temple tower that is an architectural religious structure characteristic of the major cities of Mesopotamia, now mainly Iraq, from around 2200 until 500 BCE. Ziggurats were present all over ancient Mesopotamia, with the Tower of Babel being possibly the most famous of them all. There is some speculation regarding the purposes of a ziggurat. Some believe that they were used as an observatory near the top where the heavens could be easily seen. But most likely, ziggurats were known for being used as a spiritual connection between man and the gods, and a gateway from heaven to earth. They were typically very tall and resembled mountains, as many of the people believed that the gods dwelled in the mountains. There were staircases that ran up the sides that led to the top of the structure. It seems that the ziggurat allowed men, particularly the priests, to interact with the gods and perhaps elevate them to some level of godhood. This parallels the lie that the serpent told Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis. It seems that this same philosophy of achieving godhood was also prevalent in Babel. It's possible that the people of Babel thought the construction of a ziggurat structure in their city, that we now refer to as the Tower of Babel, would allow them to ascend to some type of spiritual godhood, or was a symbol of their advancement and ability to achieve some higher level. Let's continue with the story. "But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, 'If as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so that they will not understand each other.' So the Lord scattered them from all over the earth, and they stopped building the city. That is why it is called Babel, because the Lord confused the language of the whole world. From there the Lord scattered them over the face of the whole earth." We see from the next part of the narrative that God saw what they were doing and decided to intervene. One of the primary reasons that people believe God felt the need to intervene is due to the pride of the people in the city of Babel. Although this is most likely true, I think there is a deeper meaning that we cannot fully understand just based on the text. It seems that the people of Babel were set on moving forward in great human achievements, and the tower was a symbol of their advancements. They might have even had plans that would allow them to ascend to some level of godhood, either through rituals or some form of technology. They might have even sought to attain immortality and live forever in their current fallen state. We can make this assumption based on verse 6, which again reads, "Nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them." Similar to the people refusing to be dispersed throughout the whole earth, this again would have been contrary to the plans of God for mankind, as he sent a cherubim to guard the tree of life in Eden after the fall of man, in order to keep man from becoming immortal in his fallen state. Because of all this, God ultimately forced them to scatter upon the face of the earth by confusing their language and causing them to separate from one another. What's interesting about this story is how God ultimately has control over the plans of man and will intervene when he sees necessary. If the people of Babel had ultimately succeeded with their plans to do the seemingly impossible, the results could have been disastrous for the state of mankind. But what if we are beginning to see the same scenario reoccur in our world today? What if humans today are on the brink of reaching a Babel level of achievement that ultimately caused God to intervene before letting them get too far? To begin to draw parallels, let's take a look at an organization known as the World Economic Forum. According to Wikipedia, the World Economic Forum is an international non-governmental and lobbying organization based in Geneva, Switzerland. To get an idea of what the World Economic Forum actually does, their website states that the forum engages the foremost political, business, cultural, and other leaders of society to shape global, regional, and industry agendas. Essentially, the World Economic Forum is a group of wealthy elites who meet on an annual basis at Davos, Switzerland, and talk about topics such as artificial intelligence, climate change, the metaverse, the digital economy, and much more. You can go to their public website and get a more detailed understanding as to what types of discussions they typically engage in. The World Economic Forum actually met recently as of recording this video, from January 16th to January 20th, 2023. Their theme for this year was Cooperation in a Fragmented World. Members of the World Economic Forum include Bill Gates, Mark Zuckerberg, Al Gore, John Kerry, Justin Trudeau, and many more. Membership to the World Economic Forum is by invitation only, and people are only permitted to join after a diligent review of selection criteria. It's fascinating that an organization that claims to have so much concern for humanity only allows for a select few to be involved, especially when part of their mission statement says, "We believe that progress happens by bringing people together from all walks of life who have the drive and the influence to make positive changes." For an organization that seems to be so concerned for the citizens of humanity, they seem to be pretty quick in regards to who they want to be associated with. There are a variety of discussions and topics that have caused the World Economic Forum to garner much attention over the past few years, the most popular being the Great Reset and the 2030 Agenda. Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, even wrote a book titled COVID-19 and the Great Reset. In the book, Klaus Schwab outlines the possibilities that could arise from the pandemic that began in 2020 and how these various events could be used to reshape the entire world. In his book, he writes, "At the time of writing, June 2020, the pandemic continues to worsen globally. Many of us are pondering when things will return to normal. Nothing will ever return to the broken sense of normalcy that prevailed prior to the crisis, because the coronavirus pandemic marks a fundamental inflection point in our global trajectory. Some analysts call it a major bifurcation, others refer to it as a deep crisis of biblical proportions, but the essence remains the same. The world as we knew it in the early months of 2020 is no more, dissolved in the context of the pandemic. It's clear that the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab do not want to return to the world that was present prior to the pandemic. Instead, they are viewing the crisis as a means to reshape the world into what they consider to be a superior system. The Great Reset is said to be divided into various components. According to Schwab and the World Economic Forum, the most integral component is known as the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is a term that is used by Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum to describe the ways in which approaching technologies could be used to reshape the world. Schwab has been writing about this Fourth Industrial Revolution years before the pandemic in 2020. He wrote an entire book titled The Fourth Industrial Revolution, which was published in early 2016. The World Economic Forum describes the Fourth Industrial Revolution as follows. The Fourth Industrial Revolution represents a fundamental change in the way we live, work, and relate to one another. It is a new chapter in human development, enabled by extraordinary technology, advances commensurate with those of the First, Second, and Third Industrial Revolutions. These advances are merging the physical, digital, and biological worlds in ways that create both huge promise and potential peril. The speed, breadth, and depth of this revolution is forcing us to rethink how countries develop, how organizations create value, and even what it means to be human. The Fourth Industrial Revolution is about more than just technology-driven change. It is an opportunity to help everyone, including leaders, policymakers, and people from all income groups and nations, to harness converging technologies in order to create an inclusive, human-centered future. The real opportunity is to look beyond technology and find ways to give the greatest number of people the ability to positively impact their families, organizations, and communities. It's fascinating how most of the members of the World Economic Forum are advocating for the unification of the different nations of the world in order to work together to create a new world system where technology is at the center of it. This seems very similar to how the people of Babel sought to work together in order to create a great achievement contrary to what God had commanded them to do. It's almost as if the World Economic Forum is seeking to return to that same system that was present in Babylon or Babel. The connections become even more interesting when you take a look at one of the most prominent speakers of the World Economic Forum, Yuval Noah Harari. Yuval Noah Harari is an Israeli historian and professor at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He is a recurring speaker at the World Economic Forum meetings at Davos, where he typically speaks about upcoming technological advancements and how they will ultimately shape the human race. He has written many books on these subjects that deal with these types of topics. What's also interesting is that Bill Gates has stated he is a big fan of everything Harari has written. Harari has also had influence on some other members of the World Economic Forum, with one of them of course being Klaus Schwab himself. Since Harari seems to have so much influence over those in high positions of power, let's take a look at some claims he has made during some of his discussions. One of the most radical beliefs of Harari is that technology as we know it will eventually allow for humans to be elevated to, in his own words, the status of gods.
Talking about this issue of the future, it should be very, very clear that the future is not deterministic. Nobody has any idea how the world would actually look like in 50 years. And it's still up to us. Technology is going to change the world in dramatic ways. That's certain. AI and bioengineering will change the world, will change us, humanity. The technology we are now developing really elevates us to the status of gods, the gods of planet Earth. And we can use that power to create paradise or to create hell.
Harari also believes that whatever does occur in the not-so-distant future will require global cooperation.
What are a few things that we can do to create that, and not to create this dystopian reality where most of us will be rendered useless?
There are many things, but the key is to have global cooperation. Because whatever you do, in order to be effective, it has to be done on the global level. This is not something that any particular nation, however powerful, can do by itself.
These are some very strong statements from someone who has influence over some of the most powerful people in the world. Harari also believes that technology will inevitably cause humans to be replaced and dominated by hybrid creatures.
We are probably one of the last generations of Homo sapiens. Within a century or two, Earth will be dominated by entities that are more different from us than we are different from Neanderthals or from chimpanzees. Because in the coming generations, we will learn how to engineer bodies and brains and minds.
If Harari is correct, which is a big if, and humans will ultimately be replaced by some type of half-human, half-technological entity that has the abilities of gods, then that would entail some type of digital immortality. While this all seems like something out of a strange science fiction novel, it's worth taking a look at some technology that is currently being developed, such as Elon Musk's Neuralink. Elon Musk launched Neuralink in 2016 and went public with the project in 2017. The goal of Neuralink is to implant a small microchip to the cerebral cortex in the brain with the intention of helping disabled people regain some of their functionality, such as restoring sight to the blind or restoring movement to those who are paralyzed. While all of this sounds good, Elon has mentioned multiple times how this technology could be used at some point in the not-so-distant future to enable people to have more powers and capabilities than we currently have. For example, Elon believes that at some point, Neuralink will allow people to communicate non-verbally with one another. He also mentions that it could be possible to store and upload memories from our brains to a cloud, and eventually even upload our consciousness to robots. While most people agree that this technology sounds creepy, Elon tends to believe that humans merging with machines is inevitable in the long run, as he has often talked about the potential dangers of AI technology for the future. This is why he used the phrase, "if you can't beat them, join them," when he initially launched Neuralink. And again, while all of this sounds like nothing more than some type of science fiction novel, it seems that Neuralink is continuously making strides each year. In 2022, Elon Musk showcased various monkeys using a computer telepathically via the Neuralink chip. He also showcased the way that he plans to implant the Neuralink chip into people's brains, and if it does end up being successful, it will be relatively quick and easy. Musk recently claimed that he plans on putting Neuralink inside the heads of humans by sometime in 2023. What's fascinating is that there is another company with an extremely similar project known as Synchron, who are already executing human trials with some success. If these technologies continue to advance to the levels that both Elon Musk and Yuval Noah Harari believe they have the potential to, then the theoretical possibilities associated with these types of technologies are limitless, and might in fact allow humans to rise to some level of godhood after all. All of these ideas of man merging with machines in order to become a god of the earth is ultimately nothing more than the Tower of Babel narrative making a return in the modern world. In the same way that the people of Babel had aspirations to make a name for themselves and possibly ascend to godhood, the people behind these technologies literally believed that they could be the key to ascending to some type of god status over the earth. And perhaps they are correct to make these assumptions, as it seems God himself said in the Tower of Babel narrative that, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. In the same way that humans are currently connected and using technology to advance to a level of godhood, I think it is reasonable to assume that God will intervene before these technologies manifest in the ways that some of these elites predict will occur. The last topic that I want to cover in regards to the Return of Babel is the European organization known as CERN. CERN has gained a lot of attention over the past few years and has had a lot of wild conspiracies associated with some of their projects. CERN was first established in 1954 and is currently an official United Nations General Assembly observer. CERN is composed of 23 member states as it is a worldwide collaboration. It is also worth noting that CERN has been involved with many of the meetings of the World Economic Forum at Davos, Switzerland. One of the most fascinating facts about CERN is that it is the birthplace of the World Wide Web. According to their website, the web was originally intended to function as a means for researchers to share information quickly between universities and institutes around the world. It was founded for that purpose by Tim Berners-Lee in 1989. CERN states, "The basic idea of the World Wide Web was to merge technologies of personal computers, computer networking, and hypertext into a powerful and easy-to-use global information system." The World Wide Web was eventually made open to the public on April 30th, 1993. CERN has also made a variety of other scientific contributions to the world, most of which deal in the field of nuclear physics. According to their website, the general goal of CERN is to unite people from all over the world to push the frontiers of science and technology to benefit them all. Besides the World Wide Web, it can be argued that the most famous project developed by CERN is the Large Hadron Collider. The Large Hadron Collider was developed by CERN between 1998 and 2008 and is located in Geneva, Switzerland. The Large Hadron Collider, or LHC, is the world's largest and most powerful particle accelerator. It started up on September 10, 2008, and remains the latest addition to CERN's accelerator complex. The purpose of the Large Hadron Collider can seem vague and mysterious, especially to those who don't have a proper understanding of the physics involved. CERN states that their work helps to uncover what the universe is made of and how it works. We do this by providing a unique range of particle accelerator facilities to researchers to advance the boundaries of human knowledge. Ultimately, the goal of the Hadron Collider is to allow physicists to test the predictions of different theories of particle physics. They accomplish this goal through the smashing of different particles within the Hadron Collider. Through the use of the Hadron Collider, CERN was able to prove the existence of the subatomic particle called the Higgs boson, which is thought to be a fundamental building block of the universe that dates back to the supposed Big Bang. According to Space.com, the LHC can reproduce the conditions that existed within a billionth of a second of the Big Bang. Essentially, the researchers at CERN are extremely interested in what makes up the universe and reality itself, and are using the Hadron Collider as a means to understand the particles that make up the universe. A lot of various conspiracy theories have circulated the internet regarding what CERN is actually researching and the true purpose of the Hadron Collider. Although there is no way to necessarily validate these claims, there is a fascinating quote by Sergio Bertolucci, a former director of research in scientific computing at CERN. In an article published in 2009 by the Toronto Star, they reported on Sergio Bertolucci stating that the Large Hadron Collider could open doors to different dimensions of some kind. He is quoted saying, "Out of this door might come something, or we might send something through it." The fact that the director of research at CERN was at one point entertaining the idea of different dimensions or portals being opened through the LHC is alarming. To finish off discussing CERN, I want to mention that there are periods when the Hadron Collider is in operation and periods when it is shut down. The first active period was from 2009 to 2013, with a shutdown period that followed until 2015, where the collider was again operational until 2018. Just recently, the third operational period began on April 22, 2022. The run is expected to continue until 2026, where it will shut down again until sometime in 2028. So what do we make of all this information? I think it's fascinating the parallels that one can draw from modern-day technology to the Tower of Babel narrative. It seems that the technology associated with the World Economic Forum, Neuralink, and the research at CERN is delving into territory that might be emulating the same kinds of things that caused God to intervene at the Tower of Babel. If Elon Musk and Yuval Noah Harari are correct about their assumptions of the coming technological advancements, then humans will have the ability to ascend to some level that can only be described as godlike. I also find it fascinating that groups like CERN and the World Economic Forum are obsessed with globalism and uniting the world into one system, similar to the people of Babel. So where could all of this technological advancement lead to? If we are actually entering into a time period that rivals that of the Tower of Babel, what will the result look like? I believe that all of these events indicate that we could be entering into the final days before Jesus' return to Earth. Throughout the entirety of the biblical narrative, there are often typologies that are used to symbolize future prophetic events. There are many examples throughout the Old Testament period of people who were types of Christ. Joseph is one example. Joseph was a shepherd, was betrayed by his 12 brothers who represented the 12 tribes of Israel, was falsely accused and thrown into prison, was exalted after all of his humiliation, and finally, he revealed himself to his brothers when they saw him a second time. All of these attributes of Joseph mirror the future prophetic events that are ultimately fulfilled in the life of Jesus. Jesus was also a shepherd, betrayed and humiliated by the Jews who were the 12 tribes of Israel, and he will eventually be exalted and reveal himself to the nation of Israel in the same way that Joseph revealed his identity to his 12 brothers. Typologies are not just present in order to reflect the life of Jesus, but are also often used as a way to foreshadow future prophetic events. For example, the Bible talks about an event known as the abomination that causes desolation. This event is first brought up in Daniel 9:27 when referring to a future world leader during the 70th week of Daniel. Daniel 9:27 reads, "He will confirm a covenant with many for 1/7. In the middle of the 7, he will put an end to sacrifice and offering. And at the temple, he will set up an abomination that causes desolation, until the end that is decreed is poured out on him." This event is also spoken of by Jesus in Matthew 24:15-16. Jesus said, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." The abomination of desolation seems to indicate that some type of earthly king will set up an idol in the Jewish temple. Again, this prophecy has types to it. One example can be seen in the form of a Greek ruler who was known as Antiochus Epiphanes. In 167 BC, Antiochus Epiphanes set up an idol of Zeus in the temple in Jerusalem, as well as sacrificed a pig on the altar. Although some believe this to be the fulfillment of the words spoken of by Daniel, we can see that Jesus refers to the abomination of desolation taking place in the future. And since Antiochus Epiphanes ruled years before Jesus' time on earth, Jesus must have been referring to a future event. It's most likely that the event that occurred in 167 BC was merely a shadow of a future prophetic fulfillment. I believe that the same idea can be applied to the Tower of Babel narrative. I believe that the Tower of Babel narrative could possibly be alluding to some type of future world system that will be opposed to God and seek to elevate themselves above him. Although I do believe that the Tower of Babel narrative did actually occur in the way that the Bible describes the events, I think that the story is also being used as a way to foreshadow some type of future prophetic fulfillment. As we looked at the goals of the World Economic Forum, the words of Yuval Noah Harari, the technological advancements being made by Neuralink, and the experiments being done by CERN, it seems that the technology we are approaching could possibly push the world into some type of post-human era. We also know that many technocrats are pushing more and more for globalism and ultimately a one-world system. All of these things parallel the characteristics of Babel. In the same way that God intervened just before humanity was able to reach that level of advancement, I believe there's a chance that God will intervene in some form before humanity is allowed to get to that point. We can see that from Daniel 7 and Revelation 14, that the world will eventually be under a type of global government system that is ultimately ruled by one person or authority. Both Daniel and Revelation also tell us that this time period in history will ultimately end with the return of Jesus, or the Ancient of Days, who will establish an everlasting kingdom that will not be destroyed. If the Tower of Babel narrative truly is a type of the coming global kingdom that was spoken of by Daniel the prophet and the Apostle John in Revelation, then perhaps all of these technological advancements that we are beginning to see manifesting will ultimately culminate with the return of Jesus, who will bring judgment upon all the evil rulers of the earth and establish an everlasting kingdom. Although I believe no one can truly be sure of what the future will look like, I think it would be wise to be mindful of these words given to us by the prophets as we try to gain an understanding as to what is going on in the current world, as it is possible that we could be witnessing the end of the age and the return of Babel.